Normally, I just don't breathe while we're doing the podcast. It's just good mic etiquette. So,
Thomas,
Ben.
remember that time we did a podcast together? We called it Obscurigami.
It's a very vague sort of like memory. It's in there with the learning to walk, that kind of thing.
So you could say that recording this podcast was foundational.
Yes. And also...
For you.
Yeah.
For me, it was meaningless.
Right. it was hugely foundational in my life, I have to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was then. This is now.
This is now. This is the season 2 premiere of the Obscurigami podcast.
I thought we called it Obscurigami.
No.
Did we not?
No.
No.
There was probably our show was called Obscurigami at some point. Right. But then there was a rift that opened between two parallel universes. And you are from the universe where it was called Obscurigami. I am from the universe where we called it Obscurigami.
So somehow instead of having...
You got switched with the you that exists in my universe. Or maybe I'm in your universe now. We really have no way of knowing.
This feels like my universe.
It feels like mine, I'm going to be honest.
I think instead of having seasons, we should just call them parallel universes.
Every time we make a new season, it's like a branch. Like we divide, it splits the universe and it creates a new parallel universe.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, that's kind of how like any show that has standalone seasons works.
Right.
Not that we're changing the format of our show in any way.
No. Mostly we just took a long unintentional break and now have to cover for it in some way.
We have to pretend like this was all part of the plan.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't because of my broken leg. No. That being in the hospital for 8 months with leg cancer. Unrelated. Same leg. Couldn't you believe that?
That was crazy.
Yeah, that was wild. But they wouldn't let us...
It's a good thing
They wouldn't let us bring recording equipment in there or anything.
So. For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Would have interfered with the leg radiation.
Anyway, now we're back with a brand new episode of a brand new show. No longer called Obscurigami, now called Obscurigami.
Yes. And this is a show where we talk about obscure things.
Yeah.
Unlike Obscurigami, where we talked about Diddy.
Obscure Diddy. Obscure ditties. Like Despacito. Oh, wait. In this universe, is that an insanely popular song?
No.
Oh, okay. We must.
And that's how we know it's my universe.
Yeah. I'm your co-host, Thomas.
And I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I guess, Ben, you have a topic for us this week? Because I sure don't.
Yeah, well, in the tradition of Magma, I'm going to reach into my own personal archives and pull out a subject that I'm well-versed in to kick off our season.
Right. What you listeners don't know about Ben is he has kind of a secret when it comes to this show, and that it's kind of like the Hulk in the Avengers, where the Hulk is always angry, and that's how he can just become huge at any time. Spoiler alert. Ben is always obscure. So, like, anything he's interested in is obscure, naturally.
Almost by default.
So, really, he doesn't have to find obscure topics. He just can talk about something.
Right.
And you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be obscure.
There's no notes for this. This is all
all
just off the top of my head.
Off the gourd.
I actually didn't even consult my sources.
Wow. So take this one with a grain of salt.
I mean,
it's more than you normally.
This is even less important or interesting than our usual choice of topics.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like,
well, it's a brand new season. It's a brand new show. We gotta keep expectations down here.
Yeah.
For the listeners at home, I'm putting my hand close to the floor.
If you're listening at home, Thomas's hand is very, very close to the floor.
Down here.
If we could get it below the floor, then maybe
I would. But
how did you go through the floor? That was amazing.
We'll get to my secret abilities in a later. That'll develop throughout the season. It's kind of a twist.
We kind of are the Avengers.
Spoiler alert for this show, but there's a twist coming up. It's like it starts out about a podcast about obscure things. It turns into like sort of an audio drama about someone discovering their superpowers.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a name for that genre?
That would be way cooler.
Like
than whatever.
the blog, the drama disguised as a blog.
The thing that starts out like it's a normal sort of documentary style nonfiction thing, and then turns into a narrative of some sort.
Yeah, what's the word for that?
Yeah, there's got to be a word for
that.
that.
If you know, write to us at info@obscurigami.com.
Okay, so what is this glorious thing that you didn't even have to take notes about?
So, once upon a time, in the 1960s, there was a filmmaker named Jerry Anderson. And Jerry was British, and he made commercials, and he was going broke. And someone called him one day and said, "Hey Jerry, can you make us a children's TV show with puppets?" And Jerry didn't want to work with puppets, but he said sure. So Jerry created some puppet shows, and he wanted to make like adventure shows for kids because he thought they would sell well.
Was he interested in kids stuff? He didn't want to work.
He didn't
with
want
puppets,
to do,
but he was into the kid.
No, not really.
Show part.
That was just kind of
okay.
His stepping stone. He wanted to make like dramas for adults.
Right.
But obviously he was about to go bankrupt when he fell into this thing. So
yeah,
you take what you're given.
What was he doing before, like up until...
Just like commercials and stuff.
Oh, okay, I see.
So he gets this deal to make a puppet show that's like adventure driven, and puppets aren't very like mobile. Right. They're on strings. These particular puppets were marionettes.
Right.
So he's like, well, we'll just add some like really futuristic vehicles to make it super cool, and add some like motion, and it turns into this whole decade of different shows, like shows that he made over the course of a decade that are with puppets, but they're all like science fiction or fantasy or some like outlandish drama.
All like kids programming.
Right. And the style of the puppets is like semi-realistic, like they're supposed to be human.
Right. And
they get really elaborate to the point that they look like realistic dolls. And the visual effects are like an inspiration for visual effects people everywhere, because they're so cutting edge. And
so these shows are playing out over the course of how long did you say?
A decade.
A decade. So there was some success to them?
They were internationally very popular. They're big in Japan, anywhere they speak English, except for America.
Right.
Although they did have some broadcast in America. Yeah, so it becomes this internationally successful phenomenon. He has these shows, Stingray, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and the Mysterons, that become international success stories, and they make him tons of money, and he goes out of the puppet business. He starts making adult dramas, which is what he wanted to do.
The whole time.
The whole time.
Yeah.
And he moves on, and the popularity of these shows kind of wanes a little bit. And
or do the shows continue in his absence?
No.
Okay.
No.
But they're just sort of fading into
the style sort of fades away.
Right.
And he's kind of the only one doing it. There's a few people imitating him, but it kind of fades away. Fast forward 10 years later, I guess I should say, the style takes on the name Super Marionation.
Super Marionation.
He puts together the words super, marionette, and animation. Very cleverly.
That is clever, yeah. It's kind of like what we're doing here at Obscurigami Nation.
Mashing words together.
Yeah, Obscurigami Nation. It's a very original concept, taking two words,
right,
combine them.
The words that we put together, listeners, in case you missed it, are obscure
and gami.
Right. So fast forward 10 years. His career in live action didn't go so well. But there's kind of a resurgence of interest in his puppet shows. And so he's trying to like capitalize on this and kick off a new wave of these shows.
Super marionation.
Super marionation. Hyper realistic puppets.
Yeah.
With really cool special effects. And what I want to talk about today, the main focus, I could do a whole show on just super marionation. But the focus I want to talk about today is a Japanese attempt at this obscure little subgenre of filmmaking.
A Japanese attempt at super marionation.
Yes. In 1980, there's a guy named Go Nagai, who's famous for his manga and his anime, none of which I've seen, but they're all out there. And if you're really into classic anime, he created a lot of the like giant robot type anime that was becoming really big at the end of the 70s in Japan. Yeah. But he decided he wanted to do like kind of a tribute series to Thunderbirds and to Super Marionation. The show is produced in 1980 to no great fanfare. There's one season and it's canceled. There was some talk about making a second season, but the warehouse where all the props and sets and everything was burned down. So
was burned down.
Was burned down.
That was an act of.
We don't know if it was past tense.
Right.
We don't know if it was intentional or we can only assume.
There's a lot. I hear there's a
puppets.
lot of shady business in the puppet TV show.
I mean, there's
arena, so
it's pretty dark.
You never know.
It's a pretty dark world, the puppet world.
Yeah. So they've made this show, and now it's 1983. What's it called?
It's called X-Bomber.
X-Bomber.
And it actually doesn't make it through its original broadcast run in Japan.
They made the whole thing.
They made a whole season.
But they don't even
But they
air
don't
all
broadcast all
right.
of them because the ratings are so bad.
Yeah.
Well, being opportunistic businessmen, they try to sell it internationally in Europe. And they do Starfleet. It's the same show, it's just dubbed in English and with new music. And Starfleet becomes a big hit in Britain. It's like a Saturday morning phenomenon. This is 3 years later in 1983. Right. So by this time, Jerry Anderson is trying to produce his own show that's trying to bring back the style.
Yeah.
That's a similar kind of concept. And he's worried about being accused of copying these people who copied him. But Starfleet is actually a lot more popular. And the reason
more
people...
popular than any of Jerry Lewis's stuff ever was.
Way Anderson. More popular than Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah.
Ever was. So it's a big hit in England. And if you watch it, it's kind of hard to see why, because the dub is not very good. So the basic story is, it's set in the year 2999. Earth is recovering from like a third space war. Like a giant world war, but in space. And it's this big international thing. An alien force comes out of nowhere, basically eliminates Earth's defenses, is holding the Earth hostage, and asking them to turn over the F-01. And nobody on Earth knows what the F-01 is. But to save the planet, the generals of Earth have to bring out this super starship that they've been building. And the starship is piloted by 3 heroic young cadets just out of the academy.
Right. Naturally.
And this wise guru doctor who kind of runs the show. And just for good measure, they also have this girl that tags along with them, who's kind of mysterious. She was like born on Mars and nobody knows her past. And she's got like this alien bodyguard. There's a robot. It's kind of like a Star Wars kind of cast. Pretty like stereotypical. But they've got this awesome thing. It's sort of like the X-Bomber is sort of a cross between the Millennium Falcon and an X-Wing. Because it's X-shaped, but it's also like bigger.
Right.
So you know, it's got one up on Star Wars. This was made in like the wake of Star Wars, so the influence of Star Wars is felt heavily throughout.
Strong, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Star Wars meets Thunderbirds.
So we have this show that is
a combination of these.
Combination of Thunderbirds, some Star Wars. It's puppets. It's got a mysterious girl from Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And
an Ep-01 that nobody knows what it is.
Ep-01. What is it? Who knows? It could be anything.
One other important fact that you need to know before we go off on this journey into X-Bomber is that in addition to having this like hybrid Star Wars spaceship, they also have 3 little fighters that like are attached to the body of the spaceship.
Okay.
And when they launch, the 3 cadets each fly one, and they join together, the 3 fighters, to make a giant robot.
Interesting. Okay.
Called the Die-X.
The Die-X. All right.
So, giant robots.
Is it like a mech type, like humanoid type robot?
Sort of. I'll display a picture.
Oh wow.
So the head is a fighter plane.
I see.
And the chest is a fighter plane.
Right.
And the legs are a fighter plane. It's puppets. So the theories for why this bizarre Japanese thing is so popular. For one thing, it had a lot of stuff that kids' TV in the 80s didn't really have going for it. It had some new ideas that were kind of old hat in Japan, but hadn't really been translated to an English audience before.
Right.
It was at the time, the time being 1983, the most accurately translated Japanese TV show to an English audience. So it retained a lot of its unique Japaneseness in a way that the English audience wasn't really familiar with.
Right. So there would have been novelty there that wouldn't have existed in other...
Also in something that is, as far as I know, unique to this style of television program, it has a complete story arc to the season.
Oh, okay.
There's like a beginning and an end to it, and it's serialized. So it's basically like one big story that's broken into 26 chapters. So it's kind of different. It's kind of interesting. It's a Saturday morning hit. It's such a big hit that the British producers get on the phone and call Japan, and they're like, "Can we get another season of this? Because we're making money, and we'll pay for another season." And they're like, "Sorry, it's all been burned.
The show burned to the ground.
The show has been burnt. The entire cast is gone." It's an interesting little artifact. It's kind of fun. If you are interested in that sort of thing. It's very quirky and unique, and there's not a lot of other stuff like it. The puppets are rod controlled from beneath rather than being marionettes.
So it's super rod control animation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of a weird hybrid of the Muppets, Star Wars, and Thunderbirds, because they're controlled from beneath rather than above.
Jerry Lewis, not to be, I'm getting ahead of us ourselves.
Jerry Anderson.
Jerry Anderson. There's this success or this show that's quite successful, and Jerry Anderson around the same time, if I remember correctly, is wanting to get back into this.
Yeah, and he does. He has a show that lasts for 2 seasons, and there's kind of just a general resurgence of interest in his shows as VHS starts to come on the scene.
Right. Yeah.
And eventually repeats of his shows get shown on the BBC, and it becomes like a cult classic in Britain. So Jerry Anderson goes on to live a pretty successful life and
doing the thing.
Be remembered for the thing that he did by accident.
The thing that he did that he didn't really want to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I think ultimately he kind of embraced
He came around to it. Well, obviously he didn't I mean, there are some people who do things that they really hate, but he must not have hated it that much.
Yeah, clearly not, because he went back and
seemed to be into it.
Yeah, he actually remade one of his shows in 3D animation towards the end of his life.
Were his shows, you might have already said this, but were his shows big in Japan?
Yeah.
That's what led to.
That's what led to
Right.
the creation of X Bomber.
Yeah. But X Bomber didn't do well in Japan.
No.
That's the weird part.
No, not in its original
it did
run.
well in
But it did extremely well in Britain.
In Britain.
And in France.
and in France. Neither did well in the U.S.
Yeah, none of these shows have really exported to America.
Right.
I think that's because of a prejudice
against
towards
puppetry.
against puppetry
What
in
were,
America.
What were Americans watching at that time?
Like-
MASH and like.
Are you talking about when Jerry Anderson was in his
Yeah,
heyday,
that
or
era. Well, I guess around the era of the post Star Wars era of TV. What would have that been? Around what was that? That was like.
Yeah, I mean, MASH would be on.
And like, what's that show called? With the van and Mr. T.
The A-Team.
Yeah, the A-Team.
Yeah, the A-Team would
MacGyver,
still
that
be on
kind of-
TV.
that kind of crap.
But the like Saturday morning stuff that would have
Stuff.
been competing with it would have been like
Cartoons would have been.
yeah, Thundercats,
Yeah.
He-Man,
Right.
those kind of shows.
Why do you think Americans are prejudiced against puppets?
I think because Sesame Street has been a big success here, and it creates this idea that
They're for children.
well, that all puppetry is like Sesame Street.
Okay. So there's a...
So it's for children, and also if it's not like Sesame Street or the Muppets,
Right.
we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So, and especially, there's a thing called the Uncanny Valley
Right.
that you may have heard of, which is, it turns up a lot now with computer graphics. The theory is that if you're creating something realistic to look like a human, you start on the scale being very abstract, being like a smiley face drawn
Right.
on a piece of paper or something. And people are willing to accept that and anthropomorphize the smiley face. And as you continue up the scale from abstraction to realism,
You hit a point.
you hit a point where things are not quite real enough,
Yeah.
but a little bit too real,
Yeah.
to the point where it gets creepy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these shows fall into that category for people because they're intended to be humanoid characters. It's not like Yoda or something,
Right.
which is a puppet that people tend to accept
Yeah.
because he's not supposed to be human. He's more abstract. So you have these less abstracted characters that are still
Right.
not quite human. It can create that uncanny valley trigger.
But obviously the French and the Brits and the Japanese with Anderson's
Are willing to suspend their
are
disbelief more.
willing to suspend their disbelief. I
And
feel
other
like
countries too, like South Africa around this time had their own
I feel like
series in the
they're-
same vein.
that's true to a certain that whole dichotomy. It's animation is obviously popular in the United States, but there's a weird thing where animation almost exists primarily in like Arrested Development in the US, where it's like it's a kids thing.
Yeah.
It's just, or it's like we can only portray it in these certain types of
Yeah.
styles.
Well,
or
it's like
ways.
Disney.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Disney animation reigns supreme
Yeah.
over all other forms
So we
of
have
animation.
we have these like monolithic. We have the monolithic puppet category, which is like the Muppets in the U.S.
Right.
And then anything that is deviating from that
Yeah.
is struggling for some reason.
And I think the same thing is true in comics. Because
Yeah,
like the
that's
superhero
true.
genre reigns supreme, like
Yeah.
DC and Marvel, even though there's Dark Horse and there's all these
Right.
there's Vertigo, there's all these independent publishers that
Yeah.
produce comics that are different or nonfiction, and which is starting to gain more traction now
Yeah.
in the like post Neil Gaiman world. But, you know, or post graphic novel, I
Yeah.
guess I should say.
Well, and I feel like media consumption is just in general becoming more multicultural with the help of the internet slowly. But
Yeah. So I'm hoping that there'll be a huge Starfleet revival, and it'll be like a multicultural touchstone.
I feel like it's just a matter of Netflix grabbing hold of
Right.
a show, which
Could be.
wouldn't be hard for them to do.
I mean, Netflix is remaking The Dark Crystal. Jim Henson's fantasy attempt. So
yeah.
depending on how that does, it could change the perception of puppetry in the world.
Netflix is currently the largest producer of content.
Anywhere.
Of anybody. So.
Of any content? Or just
like
television, movies.
TV and movies, yeah. So.
Well, as a final coda to X Bomber, there's a guitarist by the name of Brian May. He played for a little band you may have heard of called Queen.
Oh, yeah.
And around this time, he had a little boy. Let me try that again. It's a hard word to say. Boy. He had a little boy. And they used to get up every morning and eat their cereal.
And watch X
Bomber on Saturday mornings. And Brian May, who's actually an astronomer and loves science fiction and all things sciencey, really loved this quirky Japanese show. And did a cover version of the theme song on an EP that he recorded with Eddie Van Halen. So there is actually an Eddie Van Halen, Brian May version of the Starfleet theme song.
Wow.
Which we can sample if you would like.
Yeah, let's have a little bit of it. It's a lot of docking sequences.
Yeah. Which is kind of a theme in Super Mario Nation, because the puppets themselves don't do much.
Right.
There's a lot of launch sequences and elaborate construction of giant robots. The Dyax has a lot of weapons. You can shoot X's out of that X on his face.
It's too bad, that Jerry Lewis burned down that warehouse or whatever with all the stuff in it, because they could have made more seasons, and
maybe they could have made more.
Maybe it would have been wildly popular.
Who knows what it could have been?
Yeah.
So there you have it. Starfleet X Bomber.
X Bomber, Starfleet, hugely influential
in the life of
on the making of Star Fox, Star Command? Is that the name of it? Star Fox?
That's all I got. I could talk about it more.
People should go to the show notes at obscurigami.com or just the show notes, I guess, are in your podcast thing too. But anyway, click on the link to that video and watch it, because
your life will be changed.
You want to see Brian May's disembodied head floating in space.
Singing. A theme song to an 80s kids show.
Yeah, that was inspired by other weird shows.
I mean, it's just, how can you resist?
Yeah.
Click it now. Click now.
Click now. Use promo code youtube.com to get a free access to the video.
To find out the 4 things you're missing about X Bomber.
X Bomber.
The 5 things you never knew about Queen and science fiction puppetry.
Here's my question: do you ever find out what the F01 thing is, or whatever they call it?
To find the secret of the F01, you'll have to watch the show.
You have to watch the show.
It's available on DVD.
But it's not like a cliffhanger ending.
I'm not gonna. No spoilers.
You're not gonna say. Oh.
There's not gonna be any spoilers on.
All right.
On our podcast.
Spoiler free here at the Obscurigami.
We're spoiler free here at Obscurigami HQ. We've concluded the portion of the program where we talk about a topic.
Where we talk about something interesting. So now you can turn it off.
When did we talk about something interesting?
Oh. Well, this is awkward. I told you to make sure the topic was interesting.
I don't always... It's hard to come up with topics, and they can't always be interesting.
No, I'm not a judge of what's interesting or not.
Sometimes they can be boring.
You have to figure that out for yourself.
But it's...
All right.
It's still more interesting than cockroach milk, I think.
Right. Well, who knows? We'll see. Whatever it was, I guarantee you it's going to be more interesting than this segment that we insist on doing, which is the random Wikipedia article segment.
The world's least interesting segment. If you're still listening, why? Why are you still listening?
In this segment, we go to Wikipedia, we hit the random button, and then we just...
We mispronounce things.
Yeah, that's generally what happens.
Generally. But
so what do you got for us today, man?
I'm looking for the random button.
Someone at Wikipedia listens to this show and was like, "This must end."
Okay, here we go.
Remove the random button. All right,
the randomizer on Wikipedia. Okay. Let's roll the dice.
Yeah, hit the doodads. The mystery at the moss-covered mansion. This is our first book.
Is it?
I think it is.
But it is. This is, I think, the first book that we've brought up in the Obscurigami random Wikipedia article section. It's a book by Carolyn Keene. The Mystery at the Moss-Covered Mansion is the 18th volume in the Nancy Drew Mystery Stories series.
Oh, I remembered.
Published by Grosset and Dunlap. I can't even pronounce.
I can't talk either.
I can't even pronounce like a normal
We're so
word.
dumbfounded by Starfleet that we just...
It was first published in 1941. The original text was written by ghostwriter Mildred Wirt Benson, based upon a plot outline from the Stratmeyer Syndicate co-writer Harriet Stratmeyer Adams. The book's title was changed to Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion when it was revised in 1971 because the story is completely different and not much of the investigation takes place at the title location.
What's the original name of the book?
The original name was Mystery at the Moss-Covered Mountain. The book's title was changed to... It doesn't say what the original... There you go, folks. A Nancy Drew novel.
I don't know much about Nancy Drew. Who's the... Is Carolyn Keene an actual person? Or is she a pseudonym?
A pseudonym? I don't know. I assume she's an actual person.
Should we consult an expert for this?
Carolyn Keene is the pseudonym of the authors of the Nancy Drew mystery stories and the Dana Girl mystery stories. Dana Girls. Both produced by the Stratmeyer Syndicate.
She is a real person?
No,
she's a pseudonym of the authors.
Of the authors.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was a thing, like a book or like a publishing company just producing a whole series and then having a pseudonym.
That was the case with Tom Swift. Did you ever read Tom Swift?
No.
It was similar to like the Hardy Boys, only he was an inventor.
Was that the case with the Hardy Boys?
I'm not sure.
Did one person write all those Hardy Boys things?
Because they're by the same publisher, right? The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. If only we had an expert on Nancy Drew, like a Nancy Drew fan here in the studio.
Written by ghostwriters under the collective pseudonym Franklin W. Dixon. No wonder. You know, as a kid, I was always kind of like, this guy is insanely prolific. Like, you'd go to the library or
there's a lot of them.
Bookstore or something, and you just look at hundreds of, like, blue
Hardy Boys books
covers with the blue thing at the top that says Hardy Boys, and they all say Franklin W. Dixon on top of them. And I was
Tower
like,
Treasure.
that is one prolific
dude.
Turns out, not really. Mind unblown. My 12-year-old mind is completely unblown right now.
Wow. Hey, Thomas, do we have an expert on Nancy Drew that we can consult? As I've brought up like maybe 7 times now.
Yes, hello. I would just like to state that most girls who grow up reading Nancy Drew books know that Carolyn Keene is a pseudonym and that there are multiple people writing the books. And we're fine with it.
Apparently girls are smarter than boys because I had no idea that Franklin W. Dixon was not a person writing the Hardy Boys.
Right, yeah, same.
Also, if I remember correctly, the Moss-Covered Mansion has, like, wild, large cats in captivity in it.
Daggone.
Which is really interesting.
Do you know the original title?
You probably read the 1971 revision.
Yeah. You're not a true fan.
Yeah. Now that would be something for the Obscurigami podcast, is track down that original book.
I'm just going to Google it.
Before the 1971 revision, and bingo.
I'd also like to say that I checked out that book from the White House, Tennessee Library. Shout out to Sherry Tackett.
I'm sure she listens to, or I'm sure she or somebody,
Sherry's listening right
or
now.
or somebody she knows listens to the show.
Probably so. Here's a 1941 edition that says The Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion.
Did they change it from the mystery at the moss-covered mansion to the mystery of the moss-covered mansion? Is that what happened? Because they were saying most of the book doesn't actually take place at the mansion, which is part of why they changed the name. Maybe we just didn't notice that.
Yes, I think you're right.
Aha. Mystery solved. The mystery of the moss-covered mansion.
I think it was a panther.
There's like a panther on the cover of one of the editions.
Yeah.
Next thing you're going to tell me Louis L'Amour wasn't a real person.
Louis L'Amour was a real person, I think.
But how do you know?
I mean, I don't.
Any author could be suspect now. If Franklin W. Dixon isn't real.
Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest
Mark
Hemingway.
Twain. William Faulkner.
William Shakespeare.
That is a theory.
Wow.
Well, Thomas?
Well, that's I'd say that's an episode.
It's been, I won't say it's been an exciting start to a new season.
Well,
but
yeah.
it has been a start.
But like I said, that's good. We want to, reintroduce people lightly.
Yeah.
If we came in
Blazing hot.
guns blazing for season 2, people would be
Guns a-blazing.
Because here's the thing. You don't want people to get this idea in their head. They're like, oh, a new season. Maybe they've increased production value. Maybe they're putting in more effort into the show. Maybe the topics are more researched. Maybe there will actually be some educational
If anything,
entertainment
it's
value.
going to get worse from here.
No. This is like a network TV show in like its 7th season. It's starting to get worn out. It's starting to get tired.
That was our first season.
That was our first season. Now it's like we're just doing it because it pays the actors' bills, except we don't make any money from it.
Right.
So
nobody's watching. The Nielsen ratings are way down.
Yeah. So
we jumped the shark
yeah.
a long time ago. 5 seasons ago.
Go to obscurigami.com.
Mm-hmm.
Check out the show notes, click on the links, and watch the YouTube video.
Send us
your regards.
an email.
info@obscurigami.com.
Give us a call.
Whatever it is you do. And I guess we'll see you again next time.
Yeah. Watch some X-Bomber, read some Nancy Drew, and have a good day.